Welcome to the Golden State Media Concepts College Football Podcast, your ticket to all things college football. Are you looking to get your college football fix? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? Join us as we talk college football, from the national championship to college rivalries to bowl games to the Heisman Trophy to which conference is the best. We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between.
Hello and welcome to the GSMC Football Podcast. This is the college football edition of the GSMC Football Podcast. I am your host, Tom Dougherty. I'll be taking care of the college football duties here on the GSMC Football Podcast. As I have said, this is the college football edition. So we're going to talk about everything college football. Right now it is early April, so that's draft time. We're getting ready for the draft, and we also have some spring football to talk about, as we are now, I believe, 22 days away from the first day of the draft, which will be held at Jerry World, Dallas Cowboys Stadium in Arlington. First time ever we're going to have a draft in a stadium. It's going to be pretty interesting, a big sight. And then we also have a big unique draft this year where we're going to have at least 4 quarterbacks, probably 5 go in the first round, all from big schools, all people you've seen play on ESPN. I could list them all off for you. We have Sam Darnold out of USC. We got Josh Rosen out of UCLA. We have Baker Mayfield out of Oklahoma. We have, well, the one guy you probably haven't seen because he didn't play at that big of a school, but out of Wyoming, you got Josh Allen. And then out of Louisville, the Heisman Trophy winner, him and Baker are the only guys that actually did win the Heisman Trophy out of this list, but we got Lamar Jackson out of Louisville. So it's going to be interesting, and also everybody's got their own opinion. I mean, I've seen draft boards where I got Baker going first, I got Josh Rosen going last, got Sam Darnold going first, Sam Darnold going last, Josh Rosen going first. I mean, I have my own opinions on everything. After seeing Sam Darnold throw in the rain at his pro day a couple weeks ago in LA, the one time it rains in LA, he's got to throw, and he actually, reports said that he was bringing on the rain. He kind of wanted it to rain because he wanted to show off that he's not just this California quarterback that only can play in the sunshine and the good weather. He could also play in some inclement weather. He can play in a place where the ball might be wet, it might be windy. He's got the arm, and he obviously showed up at his pro day, looking mighty good. I mean, he was hitting all of his receivers, leading them well, hitting that deep ball. So I'm liking Sam Darnold. I'm reconfirming my decision to put Sam Darnold on top of my quarterback list. Josh Rosen probably will fit in at number 2 because of the fact that he probably has the most refined quarterback skills when it comes to footwork, comes to pre-snap play calls, looking off safeties, reading defenses. Maybe not the most physical talent that you'll see with like Sam Darnold, or the arm talent you see with Josh Allen, or the leg talent you see with Baker Mayfield and Lamar Jackson. But when it comes to just the quarterback skills, the quarterback measurables, he's got it between the ears, comes from a family of pretty smart people. Obviously, he's been somebody who is not afraid to speak at the microphone, not afraid to be outspoken. His coach, actually, Jim Mora, just was on Dan Patrick yesterday and had to say some things about his old quarterback. Now he's no longer the coach at UCLA, but Jim Mora Jr. was the coach the entire time Josh Rosen was there, and he did have to say something about the fact that he's a millennial, and he needed to be somewhere where he needs to be engaged the whole time, or he'll get bored. It says that he said that something about the fact that he needs to be challenged intellectually so he doesn't get bored. He's a millennial. He wants to know why millennials, once they know why, they're good. Josh has a lot of interest in life. If you can hold his interest, you'll do fine. So, I mean, Some things like that might deter people, might also read it as something a coach says. You never know. He's a scorned coach, obviously recently fired, does not have a job right now, probably looking just to make some sort of headline, whether it's to, I don't think he's helping Josh there that much, but he couldn't really be hurting him that much either, because, I mean, he's definitely somebody, once you have his interest, Josh Rosen could be your franchise quarterback. And like I said before on the College Football Show on Monday, before we kind of brought everything together here with this college football edition of the football podcast, the Josh Rosen probably would fit well with the Giants. I think that's just my take. I mean, he fitted well in a big city in LA. He's been in a big city before his whole life. He's not afraid of the cameras. He's not afraid of speaking his mind to reporters, and that's something that would match well with the New York lifestyle. I mean, those reporters definitely do not have much filter. They're going to ask you pretty much whatever they want, and they're not really shy away from you. And he's probably going to give it right back to them. So probably give him some good answers to write in their tabloids. I mean, the New York Post will probably have some good Josh Allen lines if he's ever going to be wearing that big red blue jersey of the New York Giants over there on the East Coast. Getting to other quarterbacks, we talked about it over there on Monday as well. The fact that you have 3B and 3A as Josh Allen and Baker Mayfield, they're really hard to compare because they're such different kinds of quarterbacks. I mean, you had Baker, who was a walk-on at, I believe, Texas Tech, and then he also had he transferred and then walked on at Oklahoma. Eventually did become the starter, Heisman Trophy winner, got his team to the college football playoff, did play actually pretty well in that game. And they were definitely a team that was going to fight for that championship if they were able to get past Georgia, but they weren't able to. He was just in that overtime game. That was a really exciting game there, wasn't it? I mean, you watching Baker going back and forth with a good Georgia team and their young freshman Jake Fromm. So, I mean, he's talking about a quarterback coming out of Georgia pretty soon. Probably Jake Fromm's got about at least 2 or 3 more years if he's going to stay all the way till senior season. But talking about these quarterbacks, Baker, I don't know. You obviously have the police video. You have some stuff he said at the Senior Bowl. You have him wearing the headband and being kind of standoffish with people at his pro day. I mean, there's also people who absolutely love Baker Mayfield and know him as a person and feel that he's actually going to be somebody who can take your franchise to the next level. I think he just needs to be put in the right position. I don't think he's going to go. He should be able to be. I don't think he's going to be as successful as if he goes somewhere like the Jets, playing in a windy stadium. In a division where you have a more cold weather stadiums like in Buffalo and in New York, where he's going to have to deal with some weather issues. I mean, he's going to be having to take that. He's going to have to take that Russell Wilson model where he's going to have to learn how to throw out of the pocket, but then also use his legs only when he absolutely needs them, versus the Johnny Manziel model where if you don't see your first read, you can duck out of there. No, you got to go through your progressions and then feel the pocket around you, and if it collapses, then you escape. That's what Russell Wilson does, and that's how he has become one of the better mobile quarterbacks, if not the best mobile quarterback we've seen in the recent years, and also been able to sustain it for a long time. Also a Super Bowl champion, obviously. So that's Baker. Josh Allen, though. Josh Allen obviously has the biggest arm in this draft class coming out. He's coming out of Wyoming, and he's going to be that guy who can withhold, I believe, the weather. He should go to a cold weather place like Buffalo or maybe even Denver or the Jets, somewhere where he can use that big strong arm to fit the ball into small windows. He needs to definitely work on that accuracy. That's the one thing you didn't see. His completion percentage was not at that level where you wanted it to be for a prototypical top 10 quarterback coming out of the draft. It wasn't even the highest in his conference, I don't think. Over there in the was he there in the Mountain West or the Big West Conference over there in Wyoming. So definitely some question marks surrounding Josh Allen. He threw his pro day was indoors in Casper in their dome practice facility. So we didn't really get to see how well the weather affects his ball. But if you take what you saw at the combine and what you saw at his pro day, for what it is. He definitely got the arm strength. Definitely can throw the ball as far as you need him to throw it, but he has the touch. Not every pass is going to be a deep ball. It's going to be a lot of those intermediate routes. Is kind of what the NFL's got to. It got back to that kind of West Coast offense. We're going to have a lot of passes to the running backs in the flat, a lot of little over the middle passes on those angle routes, a lot of slot receivers finding soft spots in the zone, and being able to fit that ball in tight windows. A lot of leveled routes. We're going to have guys moving linebackers out of the way in order to hit a deeper receiver down the middle on the numbers or the hash marks. So definitely a lot of nuances in the quarterback game that Josh Allen's got to get used to when it comes to his arm strength. Definitely not a question mark there, but the accuracy and touch is definitely the question mark. And obviously his durability, because he's big. He's a big guy. He's kind of that Big Ben mentality, Big Ben type, where he's going to be able to take the hits, but does he have the mental ability and the pocket presence to be able to avoid the hits? I mean, Big Ben is always known as that escape quarterback where he's going to scramble around and then have guys hanging on his back and still make a throw. And I mean, Ben's got that dime accuracy where he can drop it on a dime to whether it's Antonio Brown or Martavis Bryant over the middle or along the sideline, or just throw it up and let his receiver make a play. Josh Allen's going to probably need some help and weapons around the outside just to be able to do that. And to get some success in the NFL and the next level for him. So definitely going to be interesting. I'm going to be watching that draft closely. We're going to talk about it a lot more coming up as the lead up to the draft is going to be happening. So which quarterback's going to go where? I'm thinking Rosen to the Giants. That was my big take. That's still my big take. The Buffalo Bills, they want a quarterback. They're trading up. They got A.J. McCarron, but they're probably going to look for somebody younger to groom underneath him. So Josh Allen might be a good option for them. Sam Darnold, he should be drafted by the Browns. He should go number one. The Browns could take him because he's the guy who's probably the most ready just to jump into the league and not have to have maybe a year or two of grooming, as I believe all these other guys do need. Time to sit behind a starter and learn the nuances of the game. Sam Darnold probably has the most raw talent and body size combination in order to just get back there and go and have the most success as a rookie starter. So definitely an interesting thing to think about there when it comes to all those quarterbacks. And then Lamar Jackson, getting to him lastly, but definitely not least. He definitely showed out his ability in his pro day to not run the 40 because he didn't want to be put in that category where he should be a receiver. I mean, he had Bill Polian come out and say that he could be a receiver due to his speed and his size and body type versus quarterback. I mean, he does have kind of those spindly legs. I mean, those can always get built up. That's called the weight room. And definitely something to think about because he is always going to be the fastest quarterback. He always was going to be the fastest quarterback. He is the fastest quarterback. He doesn't need to prove it. We already kind of know that. I mean, you can watch his highlights and see how fast he runs on the sideline. I mean, but none of those guys are close to that kind of speed. I mean, I think Baker ran like a 4.4 or 4.5, which is actually pretty good for a quarterback. He may have run like a 4. I think he ran like a 4.67 or something like that. So, I think we've seen that Lamar Jackson runs like a 4.3 or something like that. So he's definitely going to blow all those quarterbacks out of the water. If he ever was forced to run a 40 or they ever did a race or something like that, he would kick their butts. So he doesn't even have to bother with it at his pro day. He didn't bother with it at the combine, and then he was making a lot of throws as well. He's got a nice little arm. He slings the ball. He's got to work on that throwing motion probably a little bit. Got to watch that ball. I mean, 'cause that's the thing with the NFL is that every single little thing that you do as a quarterback is going to be watched and scrutinized by a defense, and they're going to try and find every single little weakness to try and exploit you. And if you are Tim Tebow and you hold that ball down too long or it drops down to your waist and you kind of have a looping delivery, somebody's going to get their hand back there and knock it out, and that's going to be a fumble and a turnover likely, and maybe even a touchdown for the defense because that ball is going backwards. So hand size is another thing. That's why Jake Allen, I think, has gotten up there in the ranks of the prospects because he's got those nice big hands that's going to hold onto that ball, especially in, like I said, cold weather. Jake Allen to the Bills, Jake Allen to the Jets. I like that call because that's definitely a place where he can succeed in that cold weather area. Not that he can't succeed in a temperate area. I feel like it's the easiest place to succeed. But in the cold weather, more inclement cities, like in the east, up in the greater east, northeast up there in Buffalo and New York, or even in Denver, which is definitely the mile high. But dang, if he ever goes to Denver, want to see the ball fly, he might be able to throw the ball 100 yards in Denver. So it'll be interesting to see what he can do there. And it's just interesting to see what John Elway wants to do with his draft pick. Would the Denver Broncos trade back if there's not the quarterback they want left? Because there will be a quarterback left, because there's only they're picking fifth. There's 4 quarterbacks, and they're not all going to get picked 1, 2, 3, 4, because the Browns have 2 picks. So the Browns are going to take a quarterback. Jets are going to take a quarterback. Giants should take a quarterback. And then the Browns at 4 they're going to take Bradley Chubb, who will probably be left. Or they're going to take, Saquon Barkley. We're going to get to that maybe in the next segment, talking about running backs a little bit. But Saquon Barkley is just, I don't know. He's somebody that's going to be my shaky pick when it comes to if I was going to have to take him in the first round. I don't know about that. I'd get nervous if I was a fan base taking him in the first round, or at least even top 10. So Bradley Chubb, Quentin Nelson are sitting there. Minkah Fitzpatrick sitting there. That's what I was trying to think of as the other defensive player from Alabama, is Minkah Fitzpatrick. So if you're at 4 and you're picking at 4 and you're Cleveland, you got to think hard and long about Bradley Chubb or Minkah Fitzpatrick, whichever one is left if the Giants decide not to pick a quarterback. So if you're Cleveland, I think you stay away from the running backs. You already got Duke Johnson. You already got Carlos Hyde. So, I mean, that's just my take on the first few picks. And then if you're Denver, you have to make a decision to see if that quarterback you wanted is left, which ones are still on the board. There could be 3 left. There could be 2 left. So you got to make a decision whether you're going to take quarterback or maybe take Quentin Nelson, or just trade back and take some picks and then run with quarterback maybe in the later rounds and run with Case Keenum. So that's my takes on the quarterbacks. We'll see where they go. We're going to keep talking about it over the course of these few weeks before the draft happens. We'll see if some reports come out. We'll see if any more coaches like Jim Moore want to come talk about their player. So, I mean, we'll be right back with that.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red-hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's GSMCpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast. This is the College Football Edition. And on this College Football Edition, we're talking a little draft talk right now. Wanted to go over some of the running backs we have coming out in this draft. This is actually, I think, is a deeper running back draft than is a quarterback draft. I mean, we talk about how deep this quarterback draft is. We did talk a lot about quarterbacks in the last segment. Talked about all 5 of the ones that might go in that first round. However, I think there's going to be some serious running backs sprinkled throughout this whole draft. I mean, the whole idea that the running backs should not go in the first round, I do agree with. And I think that Saquon Barkley, the fact that he was even being talked about first pick, is kind of interesting the fact that you have so many different options that you can just kind of pick who is coming to you, basically. I mean, there's a lot of guys coming out of the SEC that are basically Saquon Barkley, but maybe better. Maybe you could turn them into a guy with a talent ceiling as Saquon Barkley does. I mean, yeah, he did run the fastest 40. He looked really good at the combine. But if you look at his actual stats, I mean, running backs, that's the thing about running backs is that that's one of the positions that in college you see the most transition to the NFL, where their stats actually carry over and they kind of have the same level of stats, whether it's yards per carry or the amount of catches out of the backfield, how good their hands are. Offenses, the type of offense can definitely dictate that, whatever kind of offense you're running in the program they're running at that school, at their school. But you got to think about some of these other running backs that are coming out of this draft. I mean, if you look at the games that were leading up to the college football playoff, and then obviously the games in the college football playoff, you will notice that there are some serious talent. There's some serious talent in the running back class coming out this year. We have out of Georgia two running backs actually out of Georgia that both played throughout that whole college football playoff. Both played very well. Nick Chubb, Georgia, he actually had more of the better overall career at Georgia, definitely broke some records, had a great regular season. And then a guy who broke out in the playoff, his name is Sony Michel. And I think Sony Michel is a guy that can be compared to Barkley because he is kind of that small home run hitter guy. I mean, he's going to kind of find his way throughout into the passing game. He's going to get passes in the flat. He's going to be elusive. He's going to make those linebackers hate to have to tackle him or hate to have to chase him around the field. And then you have Nick Chubb, who's going to be that bruiser, that every down back that I don't think, honestly, that Saquon Barkley can be in the NFL. When you're in the NFL and you're asked to be an every down back, you're like a Leonard Fournette type, like a Frank Gore type. I mean, those are two opposite inspection where one guy's career is just starting, one guy's career is ending. But they're kind of similar in the fact that they're taking the ball almost 25, 30 times a game. I mean, yeah, you have Le'Veon Bell. He gets about 35 touches a game, but that's also through the passing game as well. But a guy who's going to get the ball and have those carries, those counters, those little zone running schemes where you're going to go between those tackles and you're going to have to fight for some yards versus guys who are going to be on the edge. Like Sony Michel, I feel like he's going to be a guy who can find the edge, or if you're going to have a big hole for him, he can blast through that hole and have a home run hitter mentality, just like Saquon Barkley. So if you're not going to pick a running back up in that first round, you can wait and definitely get something with similar value as Saquon. And if you're thinking about drafting, you got to also think about money. Drafting, wherever you pick somebody in the draft, that's how much you got to pay him. So if you're thinking you can get the same kind of talent, same kind of level ceiling where you're going to be able to take that player and maybe mold him into something that he could and find his top potential, that ceiling. That's why they use that ceiling word, because that's like a guy hasn't reached his ceiling yet. As an NFL franchise, you can find that you can push that guy up to his ceiling. Saquon, I feel like he almost maybe has found his ceiling. He popped in college. You have guys that, I mean, like Leonard Fournette, you kind of knew he was going to do well because, I mean, he popped in college, but he also has popped in the NFL as well because it's just that kind of body type, that kind of runner where he's just going to run people over and he's got the technique. But Sony Michel and Nick Chubb, definitely two guys to watch coming out of Georgia. Another SEC running back is Darius Geis. He was behind Leonard Fournette for, I think, a year or two at LSU before he took over the starting role when Fournette left for the NFL, and now it's Geis' turn to come out and sit in that draft room and find out which team is going to take a chance on him. I think it's not much of a chance because he's pretty much getting close to the sure bet as much as Fournette is, because he is a talent as well. He probably learned a bunch of tricks from Fournette, sat behind him at LSU for long enough to get down his techniques, get down his workouts, find out what makes that guy tick and what makes him so talented. So it's just an interesting kind of thing that we're seeing here with Saquon Barkley getting up in the top of that draft, and nobody else is really being talked about at all. Maybe because ESPN likes to pick one person, the NFL Network likes to go find their darling that did well at the draft and just ride that wave all the way to the draft, and then maybe we'll find a sleeper throughout the draft, like a Darius Geis, or even like another SEC running back, Kerryon Johnson for the Auburn Tide coming out of Auburn. I mean, he was a guy who was almost single-handedly carrying his team. He had a quarterback who wanted to sit back more in the pocket, which is all right. I mean, they were a good tandem back there with the handoffs were in that play action. Kind of more of the pro style offense. You'll see a rarity. I mean, now we have Auburn. Usually, you see a kind of that quasi spread they ran, or more of like a running quarterback back when they had Cam Newton. But now they kind of ran more of a pro style offense this year, with more of a prototypical passing quarterback. And then they had Kerryon Johnson as that bell cow back, where he would either be taking it and going between the tackles, or he would be getting out of the backfield. Man, that guy's got good hands. He runs those wheel routes. He'll take a screen pass. He'll run those angle routes over the middle. I mean, he looks really good. And he did. I mean, they beat Auburn. I mean, they beat Alabama, won that division over there in the SEC, and then Georgia took care of them to get to the to get to the college football playoff. But Kerryon Johnson almost single-handedly took his team to the CFP out of nowhere, because Auburn wasn't even being talked about until maybe the second to last week of the season before the Iron Bowl. So got to look at that. And then obviously over you have the USC running back. You got to think about Ronald Jones Jr. coming out of USC over in California. The one guy from the Pac-12 that might actually make a NFL presence coming out of this draft from the running back position. So, I mean, he's a big guy, was at 6 foot, 200 pounds, coming out of USC. Good offense there. You got to think about how he can, he split time with another running back. I think he hasn't coming out of the draft yet, but he was a guy who could fight for yards. He's got the speed to have those big breakers. And he can also pass block as well for you. That's another thing. NFL, you got to think about always different things for running backs. Running backs are one of the more smaller. I mean, their career lengths are pretty short on average, because they're getting hit every play when they carry the ball, but then when they stay in, then they don't carry the ball on whether it's a play action or they're going out for a pass. Well, if they stay in the block, they got to deal with a lineman or a linebacker coming right at them. And I mean, I just saw, you see these highlights where these guys or these practice videos where these linebackers are just going after these running backs and trying to push them to get better at those pass blocking, because that's a big deal in the NFL. You got to be able to block. You got to be able to be the extra guy in there to help your quarterback. You got to be able to pick up blitzes, because that's what's going to help your offense. If you're not getting the ball, you can be the guy that keeps the quarterback from being sacked and allow him to get that extra time to get the ball down the field on a big play. So that's the running back thing. You got to think about it all. It's not just about the speed. It's not just about how much you can bench press. You got to be able to find those holes. You got to be able to have the vision. And that's what we're talking about, vision. You watch some of these guys; they're all pretty elusive. They're all got great cutting ability. And then Saquon Barkley somehow, just because I think he had a lot of highlights on ESPN at Penn State, he ran away with the highlight machine there, kind of loving those big long plays he was running. I mean, I feel like it was almost every game they had a play where he was running at least a 45-yard touchdown into the end zone. And then obviously you need to think about another running back who is not coming out of the draft. We're going to talk about him just at the end of this segment. His name is Bryce Love, and he plays at Stanford. He was a Heisman candidate, went to the Heisman ceremony, did not win. It was Baker Mayfield. But Bryce Love is another one of those. He's like he was playing behind Christian McCaffrey over there at Stanford, who is now on the Panthers and looking pretty good as a pretty good draft pick for Carolina. But you got to think about how he's going to do this season. This is the college football show, so we're going to talk about Stanford a little bit here and how Bryce Love is going to help that team. They're going to have they had a little bit of a quarterback shakeup over this last season. Kyler Chris, I know, has now transferred. They're going to go with the quarterback they kind of finished with over the last few games, and then obviously Bryce Love out of the backfield coming back for, I think it's either his junior or senior season, is going to be looking as a Heisman favorite, and looking like Stanford might be able to get back into that conversation to compete for a Pac-12 championship. They were in the championship game last year. I think they did get beat again by USC. And Bryce Love was dealing with a lot of injuries. He would kind of come out, go back in, come out, go back in, and then KJ Costello, that quarterback, I think it was a redshirt freshman coming in last year after the other two quarterbacks, Burns and Chris, were not just either getting hurt or weren't cutting it. And then Bryce Love was a nice little tandem with him and Costello. So the Stanford Cardinal definitely looking like they can be a contender this year with that talent in the backfield, and then hopefully helping and keeping Bryce healthy so he can help his draft stock and make him look good for coming out of the draft. I think he's going to either come out this year or next year. Those Stanford guys, you never know, because remember at Stanford they have there's only a few schools out there that have the academic rigor that they do, and then also have such a high standard for athletics. So over at Stanford, you got to make sure you're keeping your P's and Q's together with classes, and maybe not want to leave too early to go to the NFL so you can graduate from that great university over there in Palo Alto. So that's my little comments on Bryce Love. You got to remember him. He's coming out, and I think either next year or this year. We have a lot of other good running backs coming into the draft at the end of this month. Don't just think about Saquon Barkley. Think about all those other guys, Sonny Michel, Nick Chubb, Kerryon Johnson, Darius Geis, and Ronald Jones Jr. So that's just the ones that came off the top of my head. I didn't even look at any draft boards. I mean, those are just the ones I thought of. So you got to look at all those guys. And if Saquon isn't there, or if you were hoping you were going to have Saquon fall to you, there's always another option if you have a need at running back. All right, that's going to end it for this segment. We're talking a little bit about some of the spring football things going on. I know Alabama's got a little quarterback controversy going on, and then everybody is kind of getting going regarding their spring season. And you're a big program when you have your spring game on ESPN. We'll talk about that when we come back next.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA Podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
All right, welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast. This is the college football edition. I'm your host, Tom Dougherty. The first two segments, we went over a little bit of draft talk, talked to quarterbacks, we talked to running backs, and now we're going to get back to some real hard-nosed college football reporting, and it's all about the spring football. I know right now Georgia just began their third week of spring practice. We also have TCU having their spring game coming up. We got also Washington getting in their spring practice there. We kind of went across a bunch of different conferences there. I know we have an Alabama story to talk about because during their spring practice, they have a quarterback decision. I mean, it's Nick Saben. It's one of his toughest decisions to bring up and to decide that for this season. He's got some time, obviously. It is only early April. But, I mean, the little honeymoon, as you might say, or hangover from the national championship game is making people think, why isn't Tua Tagovailoa being tabbed as the would-be starter coming up next year when he just came in for Jalen Hurts and won that game for them? I mean, I think Jalen Hurts is a good player. He's a great football player. He's got the elusiveness. He sets up blocks well. He runs the ball well. I mean, but I think he's more suited as either like a running back, or he maybe be like as a tight end, or if you put him up on the line there, he probably could block pretty well. But maybe that's a running back, pass catching running back. And then having Tua being your quarterback in the long term probably would be a better decision when you're coming from Alabama. But you never know. what Nick Saban's going to do. He's got a lot of decisions to make. I mean, it's a big program when Nick goes and has his press conferences at like April or late March leading into spring practice is already getting questions about what he's going to do come fall when the season actually starts. And he didn't want to he obviously had a little angry Nick rant when he decided, he's like, I know what you're going to ask. I'm just not going to give in to you guys. And I believe Jalen Hurts had a little bit of an issue, injury issue. So they just kind of had to look over that and decide that they were going to push on and not give anybody any information just now. So that's just kind of what's going on. We do have some new coaches in the in college football coming in for their first spring practice. I know that they have down in Tempe. You got Herm Edwards coming in to coach the Arizona State Sun Devils. His first spring practice coming in, and it's going to be interesting to decide to see what he's going to do down there with a guy who hasn't coached in a long time, hasn't coached since he last coached in the NFL for the Chiefs and the Jets. He's been sitting on the ESPN set, talking a lot about how you shouldn't use Twitter and don't press send. And I mean, this is he has one of the better sounders, better YouTube little clips when it comes to comes from coaching rants. And it's like, you play to win the game. I mean, that's all I'll remember Herm Edwards for. Also the fact that he's from California, but I mean, it's just interesting to see that he's going to be now the new head coach down there in the desert. So lots of other stuff going on. We have a new coach in Florida. Dan Mullen is going to be the new head coach in Florida, so he's going to have to figure out what it's like to be over in an SEC. Well, he's been an SEC coach before. He was a coach at Mississippi State, but I mean, that's just a different game being in Gainesville. I mean, you have Jim McElwain, who was a pretty darn good coach, but he gets shoved right out, and they go and get Dan Mullen, who is actually he was doing good work over there with Mississippi State, taking that team to the brink with Alabama and also making them a contender in the long run over his time there. So he's going to be the new coach for the Gators, have to deal with that stuff. I mean, the thing about it being a college head coach is that, it's obviously year-round. You got spring ball going right now. Then it's kind of time you got some draft stuff, recruiting, you're trying to pump up your players, help there. Then you got to get ready for the season. You got to go back to training camp, and then you're going to be right over there. And by the way, you're recruiting the whole time. You got to deal with, when you're an NFL head coach, you got to deal with a GM and an owner. I mean, if you're Bill Belichick, you deal with just the owner because you are the GM too. But I mean, as a college coach, you have an athletic director. You usually have a coordinator of some sort that is alongside the athletic director for football operations. Then you have, if you're at a bigger school, and then you have the president of the university, a chancellor likely, and then the almighty boosters. I mean, when you're at Florida, something that Dan Mullen may not have experienced at Mississippi State is the fact that these boosters have a lot of pull because they donate a lot of money to these programs. And I believe it was the boosters that actually got Jim McElwain out of there. Also in the SEC, we have Will Muschamp going over to South Carolina. Actually, I think he was there 1 year last year. Coming in there, he's talking about how his team's looking good coming into the 2018 season over there in Columbia. Then we have Nick Saben, of course, with his Coke bottle. Tide reloaded a lot with that 2018 class. I mean, when it comes to recruiting, Nick Saben is almost second to none because that Alabama name does help him carry some pedigree, but then he doesn't waste any time. He gets in those people's houses. He talks to their parents. He talks to their grandparents. He talks to their aunts and their uncles. I mean, he dances with them. I've seen videos. There was a video coming out on Twitter with Nick Saban doing the Cupid Shuffle with a whole family of people trying to get a recruit to come to his school. I mean, you can't blame him, honestly. In Georgia, you got Jake Fromm coming back off his freshman season, coming in for a big sophomore season. He's getting ready right now with spring ball. They're, like I said, they're in their third week of practice and spring practice. I believe they're going to have a game coming up here soon if they haven't already. But yeah, Jake Fromm just been, running drills, handing off to running backs. It's all pretty much simple. Nothing really, none of the big stories. But they do have a good little running back coming back from last year. After they're going to be losing, like I talked about in the last segment, they're going to be losing Nick Chubb and Sony Michel from Georgia, but they have another good running back in DeAndre Swift, who I actually kind of like to see how he's going to do this year, and then how he's going to transpire into the NFL. But yeah, Jake Fromm definitely got some weapons on his offense that he's going to be able to be using coming this season, and then obviously a whole year and the whole offseason smarter, as he was a freshman last year. Literally had his high school, I think his team won state or something like that, and he was all of a sudden in the national championship game. Now he's going to have a whole year of experience under his belt, and probably looking to get Georgia right back where they were last year, and probably looking to, definitely looking to get them in the win for them, as they had it snatched from them last year. They had the win. Kirby Smart was looking there. I mean, talk about depression as a coach. I mean, if you're Kirby Smart, you just had a win snatched from you. I think they were up by 3. They just had a sack. Tua took a sack, and then all of a sudden it's 4th and 40 or something like that. They have to score a touchdown. Literally have to score a touchdown. It's sudden death it's the overtime rules in college in that CFP and college football playoff national championship game, and Tua finds the receiver down the sideline on the left side and beat that corner. The safety got over too late, and you could just see Kirby Smart. His face just went from happy to sad so much faster. It's ridiculous. So fast. It was pretty sad actually seeing all the little. I mean, you got to love the ESPN when they do those broadcasts. They have all the cameras pointed everywhere. I mean, you got Nick Saben, who's just like, oh my god, and then you got Kirby Smart just like, oh no, just like a head down in between his legs. I mean, it's just ridiculous. Gets rid of the mic, gets rid of the headset, drops the thing, and I mean, the game was over. It was a walk-off touchdown. I mean, something that you don't really see in college football that much. Because, I mean, these games are either blowouts, they got close games, and that's a weird overtime rules in college. Obviously, you start from the 25-yard line, you kind of go back and forth on the who has possession and stuff like that. So that's how the cookie crumbled right there for Georgia, and they're looking to get back and avenge that loss from last year after a very, very, very promising season when you had another SEC power right next to you in Alabama, and then obviously having to fall to them probably leaves a little bad taste in your mouth right there. All right, so we got Spring Bowl projections and college football playoff picks coming up on the next segment, but we'll keep talking a little bit more about how Tua Tagovailoa. I was going to call it Tua. I can't pronounce his name. I'll have to look it up for the next spelling of it. I can't pronounce his name. And Jalen Hurts are going to be battling out over this whole offseason, this whole spring to get that starting job. It's going to be an interesting pick to see what Nick Saban does. It's been said, obviously, there's been reports saying this is going to be one of the more interesting and hard picks, I think, in Nick Saban's career, as he usually has a quarterback. The way he recruits is in order for him not to have to make this decision too often, because the way you recruit is you kind of will recruit a guy, then you wait a year, so there's never a guy right beneath him. That's kind of what he did anyways. I mean, because Jalen, I believe, was a junior last year, and Tua was a freshman. So you have that year in between. You don't draft players in back-to-back years, especially if you're intending them to start, so you can have players get more time. So, I mean, if Tua would have had to wait the 2 years if he didn't play last year at all, and then not this year at all, he still would have 2 more years to start. And that's kind of how it works, and that's how Nick Saban's been doing it the last few years. He really has a freshman even smell the field, especially a quarterback. So, I mean, it's going to be interesting seeing how he will make that decision, and also it'll be interesting to see how they will replace the losses on their defense with especially Minka Fitzpatrick going to the NFL. I mean, you can't fault Nick. I mean, he's going to be finding somebody somewhere to get in that safety position. You can always find good defensive players at Alabama. It's ridiculous how they just keep shuffling them in there to play defense. I mean, that defense is always almost like pro style defense, where they're just disguising blitzes. They're having corners come down from the slot, the blitz. They have good shut down safeties. I mean, over the top. They got shut down corners on the outside. Obviously, you got big linemen and then really fast linebackers. We've already seen a bunch of other linebackers like C.J. Mosley, and maybe we'll see what happens with Reuben Foster. But these guys are just quick. They do get worked hard at Alabama, but they're always NFL ready when they come out of Alabama. I mean, they come out to the draft and they are just firing on all cylinders, and that's just the thing that Nick Saben does. They're winners. They've been winning their whole career. They won before they got to Alabama. That's how they got there. They won at Alabama, and they're probably going to win more in the NFL. So that's what kind of Nick likes to think about and what Nick has to go on. So he's going to have to make a decision when it comes to this quarterback and which one he thinks is going to actually last the test of time over the season. 'Cause that's the one thing that Tua did not do. He did not play during the season, really. That was Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts made it through the whole season, got him to that place where they were, snuck them into the CFP with that 4 seed, and then won that game against Clemson before having to give up the keys to the car halfway through the game against Georgia. So it's going to be interesting to see. Nick's got a lot of time to make that decision. When we come back on the next segment, we'll go over those CFP picks. We're going to go over the AP's way too early top 10. They already came out with a top 10 for next year. I'm sure Alabama's sitting right on top, but we'll kind of go over that and those way too early picks when we come back.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast, College Football Edition. Last segment, we talked a little bit about Alabama. We talked a little bit about spring football. Then before that, we talked about those talented guys, those lucky guys that are going to get picked to go on to the next level into the NFL drafts, the quarterbacks and the running backs, to be more specific. In this segment, we're going to finish off with some talk about some way too early predictions, some preseason rankings, and my picks for the next college football playoff, as we are in April, but we kind of already know what's going to be going on. We know who those big schools are. We know who the powerhouses are. Obviously, there's the Alabamas, there's the Georgias. Clemson's still going to be up there. You got Dabo Swinney. He's one of those great coaches that's going to take pretty much any team can get and then get them to the position where they need to be in the ACC, and then obviously get them into that CFP, because that is the Clemson way. My team, though, I like the way that the Oklahoma Sooners are gonna they're losing Baker Mayfield, but a transition over to Kyler Murray, a Texas football legend. He did start at A&M, but there's another guy coming from Texas up to Oklahoma, just like Baker did. Not as highly touted out of high school, Baker was compared to Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray going to Allen High School, broke pretty much every record there is in Texas high school football. But he's going over to Alabama. It's going to be interesting. He's going to be ready to take the job. He's got some early tests against UCLA and Florida Atlantic. So he's going to have to get that learning curve down. But Lincoln Riley, he's that coach that was groomed underneath Coach Stoops for a while, and he's got that team going. He did a good job last year, obviously getting that team in its first season to the CFP. So it's going to be really interesting. People have definitely give him props for being a great replacement for Bob Stoops. In Ohio State, you're losing their quarterback. They're going to have J.K. Dobbins coming back. So, it's going to be interesting. Nick Bosa, Joey Bosa's brother, are back. Dwayne Haskins had an early lead on a fierce quarterback battle, but it's going to be Urban Meyer's final decision. Urban Meyer's that coach. He's he's the guru right there. I mean, he's pretty much done everything he can. He's won everywhere he is. And now at Ohio State and Columbus, it's going to be interesting to see what he can do with that team as JT Barrett is now moving on to the NFL. And at Clemson, like we talked about, Dabo are going to lose, but Kelly Bryant, their quarterback, will be back. They're going to suffer losses to the NFL draft, but Kelly Bryant's going to be back. They're going to have Travis Etienne. He's going to be being tabbed as a value pick for the Heisman Trophy, and then obviously they can retool that defensive line. They're going to have Dexter Lawrence, who's a talented young defensive lineman. They're going to retool around him on that line to be that fierce defense as they usually are. And obviously Alabama #1. So coming off the championship, coming off of being a 4 seed in that college football playoff, they wouldn't even have had a chance to win the national championship game if it was the old way, a BCS way. But being that 4 seed, they got in the tournament. They beat the #1 seed in Clemson. They beat the #2 seed in Georgia, and now they are the reigning champions. I mean, it's going to be interesting. We talked about the QB competition. Some people called it a controversy, but I mean, there's going to be decisions to be made in other positions for Nick Saban, decisions that he needs to work on when it comes to skill players. They're losing. They're losing the big wide receiver in Calvin Ridley, and then obviously Minkah Fitzpatrick is going to be going over to the NFL as well, or likely a very early pick. Looking down the rankings here, the preseason rankings, you got Wisconsin still looking good. I mean, they have their Alex Hornibrook and the running back Jonathan Taylor coming back. Great coach, and Paul Chryst continues to improve the skill positions while following a familiar pattern. I mean, the offensive line and defensive line, they're still getting up there. Next step probably for them would be finishing the job in the Big Ten championship game like they couldn't last year. And I mean, when you're playing in the same conference as those two powerhouses in Ohio State and Michigan, and even Michigan State, you got to be able to finish off those seasons when you can get the schedule to go 12-0, and then get the right to go to a CFP maybe. They put Miami #7. This is the Sporting News is putting out this preseason rankings. Miami's #7 here. They got Auburn at #8. That's about right, because those were, I mean, these are all the teams that were competing last year. Not that many. The way these programs, they can pretty much turn over pretty easily. The way they're recruiting these days. I mean, the Tigers are going to Tuscaloosa for the Iron Bowl. Last year they did were able to host it. They also have to go to Athens and play in Georgia. It's going to be interesting the way Gus Malzahn takes that, as he did opt to stay at Auburn. I mean, there's so much talent down there on both sides of the ball. I mean, they definitely could repeat as West champions, but I mean, this time he's going to have to get Jarrett Stidham, that quarterback I was talking about before, who likes to stay in the pocket. He got Kerryon Johnson. They're going to be gone, and then Petway is going to be gone too. So I mean, it's going to be easy. It's not going to be easy when you have those guys, like those talented guys, even the guys on the defense, who are going to be going over to the NFL. In Miami, you got Mark Richt, the old coach there, used to be at Georgia. He's now down in Miami, coaching the Hurricanes. I mean, they did arrive on the big stage a little earlier than everybody was expecting. They kind of popped earlier. They got Rozier coming over on that transfer. He played really well. Malik Rozier in the quarterback position played really well for them. And then they obviously have some talent on the outside. And then obviously they were the big story of the NFL during the regular season. I mean, the college football regular season, with their turnover chain. Every time the defense got a turnover, the guy who created it or got it, caught the pick or recovered the fumble, got to wear this monstrous emblazoned with jewels chain that had a big U on it. Actually looks pretty cool, but I mean, we'll see if they bring that back with the whole turnover chain. But it's going to be back in the ACC contention. Malik Rozier, he's coming back. Got a good young running back in Travis Homer, and a cornerback Malik Young. I mean, they're going to be a force to be reckoned with in the ACC. Going to be a challenge to Clemson, so it's going to be interesting to see what they can do there. Down in the 10th position is Penn State, obviously losing Saquon Barkley. They still got James Franklin, their head coach, a great head coach, coming in, bringing that franchise back up from the ashes after everything that happened obviously back in the years with the sanctions. And then obviously Trace McSorley, he hasn't decided. I mean, if he comes back to Penn State or if he's going to go somewhere else. We'll see what happens there with Trace. I mean, if he's going to. I haven't seen any reports saying that he's going to be declaring for the NFL draft, but it's going to be interesting to see how they can replace Saquon Barkley. I mean, they're going to have a new offensive coordinator as well, because Joe Moorhead, their old offensive coordinator, did go down to take the job at Mississippi State. Now Dan Mullen is in Florida. At 11, we have Washington Huskies. Chris Peterson, the consistent winner in the Pac-12 there. Obviously, he was gifted with Jake Browning, the quarterback from Folsom. Broke all the high school records there in Folsom, and is now looking to get back in that college football playoff conversation. Obviously, was a little bit of Heisman conversation as well. His sophomore season regressed a little bit last year due to some injury. He got whacked pretty hard in that Alabama game last year, and he was playing with a kind of a bum shoulder. This will be his 4th year starting, and he's going to have to take on Auburn in their first game in a big opener, televised opener in Atlanta. It's going to be a good one to watch. Got to mark your calendars for that one. At 12, they have another Pac-12 team in USC. Sam Darnold leaving, so the quarterback focus is going to be a battle. There's going to be 3 different guys from JT Daniels, Matt Fink, Jack Sears, and Thomas Holden all be battling for that quarterback job. For the Trojans, Stephen Carr, running back, should have a breakout season, although Coach Clay Helton has reestablished that winning culture in the program. I talked about him a little bit before, how he's not that flashy coach you usually get in college. He's going to be that kind of guy who steps in there and just creates a good culture there, and makes a winning culture there for the players, those young guys out in USC. But, that's a program that is a winning culture in itself. At 13, they have LSU. Ed Orgeron, not really a head coach in my mind, but, I mean, he's a good leader of men. I mean, he's got that loud, raspy voice that you can barely understand, but, I mean, he kept the Tigers moving in the right direction in 2017. There's going to be a quarterback competition this offseason between Miles Brennan and Lowell Narcisse, with the focus on the they're going to focus more on the offense, which is what the fans want. That's what the problem was last year. They didn't score nearly enough points. Obviously, they're going to be losing one of their better players in Geis going to the NFL, the running back. We talked about him in a couple segments ago when I was going over my running backs. I like him actually. In 14, actually, they got another Pac-12 team, so we were packing up those Pac-12 teams, 11, 12, and 14 with Stanford Cardinal running back Bryce Love. I mean, he's definitely developing, but he's obviously a Heisman Trophy winner. And then KJ Costello is continuing to improve, and I think he's got a hip injury right now, which is keeping him out of spring practice, but he's going to have to get that figured out, and then obviously probably she'll be ready for the start of the season. That's not for a while. We're a ways off for that, but you never can count out David Shaw. David Shaw is one of those coaches where he's always going to have his team in the mix. He's one of those amazing, clever coaches that's going to just always figure something out for his team and put them in the right direction. When you have a talent like Bryce Love, talked about him in the last the couple segments ago, it's going to be interesting to see how he fares this season with his injury problems, and then also his Heisman Trophy stock, and then obviously his draft stock looking like either he's going to go one more year or two in college at Stanford. I mean, why would you want to leave somewhere like Stanford? I mean, obviously he's going to probably be a high draft pick and looking like a good NFL player. All right, we'll go to 15. This is number 15. Justin Fuente isn't going anywhere. He came over from, I think he was in Houston or something like that. He was that hot young coach that came over. He was just a coach that came over from a smaller school that everybody kind of wanted, that hot coach, and Virginia Tech grabbed him, and he replaced Frank Beamer, a legend over there in Blacksburg. But he's definitely going to have to figure out what he wants to do with the offense. I mean, they've proven they were good enough to compete for an AFC championship game They got to figure it out. They got to build around Josh Jackson and take the next step. I mean, he stayed around for a reason. He didn't entertain any other jobs. So that's going to be an interesting decision or an interesting go-around for him this season in Blacksburg. So that's what I kind of wanted to go over. One of the top 15 preseason picks or preseason rankings for college football as we come to the end of our show here. We kind of went over a lot of stuff. We went over quarterbacks. We went over running backs going into the draft. Talked about a quarterback controversy in Alabama. Talked a lot about spring football. We went over our preseason rankings. I mean, I can give you my picks if you really want to. I mean, this is way too early. We're going to talk a lot about stuff that's going on throughout the whole season, whole off season of college football. I mean, the spring season of college football that's going on right now. I kind of want to see Michigan get back in there. They weren't even near the top 15 or maybe the top 10 at least. I didn't see them closer to to more of the 20s down there. But with Jim Harbaugh, you got to think that they can be in contention. He's got to get their quarterback situation figured out. I'm surprised that Jim Harbaugh's been there for so long, but he hasn't been able to recruit a decent quarterback that can stay healthy. I believe they're on their third quarterback who was also playing like defensive end last year too. So it's just interesting to see Jim Harbaugh with a guy who is such a quarterback whisperer without a prototypical quarterback that he can even get talked about to go into the NFL or anything. So it's going to be a wild ride as we continue through the spring season, and then getting closer to the draft, it's going to be even more wild because we're going to have so much more speculation, even more mock drafts. We're going to have more reports coming out. We're going to have more coaches like Jim Mora coming and talking about their quarterback. There's guys who didn't like that whole idea of him coming out and talking about Josh Rosen. I think Josh Rosen is going to be fine just by himself. He's a pretty strong-headed kid, and he's going to go find a job in the NFL and probably be a pretty good success, assuming that he gets handled correctly by the NFL franchise. All right, so that'll wrap it up for today's show. It was a pleasure talking to you guys today about college football. This is the college football edition of the GSMC Football Podcast. So it's going to happen 3 days a week. We're going to do it Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, a college football edition of this football podcast. So I'm your host, Tom Dougherty, and we will see you later.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.